Well, we have got a very cool episode of Lessons from Last Time today. This is cool for a number of reasons. One, neither one of us know this guest. So this is not like normal where one of us has invited our friend who's done some amazing things to come on. This is, I met Ty once at a conference, twice, two, maybe three times, but very briefly. But I saw her stand up and talk at this conference that I was at. She just had so many amazing things to say that I was like, yes. And I was like, I wonder if there's any possible way she would be willing to come on to the podcast. And here we are months after that, and Ty Christensen's with us. So thank you for joining us. Now, because I don't know you well enough, Kirk did some research, and we don't ever read people's bios on this show, but Kirk, you need to read that bio.
Well, I'm going to use my best radio voice so it sounds impressive, but we don't do it because we typically, as Ken said, we typically know one of us or both of us know our guests pretty well. And in this case, we don't. But Ken came back from that conference and literally one of the first, we literally just moved offices, and in our old office, we shared a space. And one of the first words out of his mouth was, met this woman, Ty Christensen. You got to get her on. You got to call. You got to try to get her on the podcast. It would be great. And here's why it would be great. Ty is the co-founder and president for Arrive Home. It's a national affordable housing program dedicated to helping responsible borrowers in underserved communities become homeowners. And we're going to talk a lot more about that as we go on. But that's not all you've dabbled in. And I'm probably going to miss something, so you can fill in any blanks. You are the host of the California Mortgage Bankers Association podcast, or you were last year, on equity, diversity, and inclusion. I got that right? You handed that off to someone else recently. You were or are the chair of the American Mortgage Diversity Council, the AMDC.
Still am.
All right. Board member for Access Lift 360, which is a nonprofit that focuses on providing mortgage lending industry with more diverse talent pool of job candidates. Mm-hmm. You were the winner of the 2023 National Mortgage Professional Women of Inspiration Award, the 2023 Housing Wire Women of Influence Award, the Success Magazine 2023 Emerging Entrepreneur Award, the 2022 Thought Leader Award for Progress in Lending, the 2021 Mortgage Professional American Elite Women Award. I didn't go beyond 2021 because the list would have been too long and the entire podcast would have been me reading your bio. You've been featured on Fox Business News, in the Washington Post, in Mortgage Professional America, M Report, Real Estate Weekly, Forbes. I'm sure I'm missing some of that. So we just wanted our audience to know a little bit more about you and your background, and that your voice is out there. And we're really excited to add your voice to our Lessons from Last Time podcast.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys. I'm really excited today. I also chair the California Mortgage Bankers Association Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program and their committee. And I just won the 2024 Women in Housing Award from 5-Star. So.
See, I knew I was going to miss something.
Oh my gosh.
Good year.
Amazing. After that list, let's start at the beginning.
Why don't we just say thank you for coming?
Yeah, thanks for being here. Glad we got to talk to you. How did this all start for you? Go pre-mortgage industry. Like what's the like original foundation of Ty?
Well, kind of a twofold story there. Really interesting story how I got into the mortgage industry, but I will circle back to that point in a little bit here. So I've always kind of been involved in housing. For those of you that don't know, I've told the story a lot. I'm a 5th generation homeowner. Homeownership has been a concrete foundation of our principles of our family growing up. So homeownership started with my great-great-great-grandfather. His name is Henderson Faribault. He was born enslaved, and by 9 years old, he was picking cottons in the field on a plantation in North Carolina. And after emancipation, he had recently been moved into the house as a house Negro, and he had learned how to cook. So after emancipation, he decided to go in town to the town of Hillsborough, North Carolina, and he worked for a few notable restaurants and really made a name for himself. And he became kind of obsessed with this idea of buying property, or so the story goes, according to my great-grandmother, who has now since passed. Anyway, so he became totally obsessed with this idea of buying property. And when he died in 1902, he was 62 years old, and he owned 50 acres of land, and he had left a home for each one of his 8 children. And so I am a direct descendant from that line. There's actually a street named after him now in Hillsborough, North Carolina. And one
Wow.
of the original chimneys from one of his original homes is still there as a historic preservation site. And there is a plaque in the park dedicated to our family. So that's
Oh
kind
my
of how
gosh.
homeownership has started in my personal line. So growing up, we were always taught, you get married, go to college, get married, buy a house, go to college, get married, buy a house. And we've been able to see the transition of equity through the years, through different family members passing away. I still remember when my pop passed away. He obviously lived during the Great Depression, and he was not a huge believer in banks, but he was his own homeowner. He owned his home free and clear. And when he passed away, my dad and my uncle went to clear out his stuff, and he had bricks of cash wrapped in tinfoil literally under his mattress. So I've seen,
Mattress money.
yes, live and in living color. So funny. So moved to Utah I'm originally from Atlantic City, New Jersey. I moved to Utah to go to college, met my husband, got married, got pregnant very quickly after we'd been married. I'd only been married for about a year when I got pregnant with my oldest daughter. And I had gone to school for interior design. Well, interior design back in the early 2000s involved you going to your clients' homes and actually going to brick and mortar stores to shop for them. Obviously, with a brand new baby, that wasn't exactly convenient. So I just happened to be on the phone with, of all people, my husband's ex-wife one day. And I was giving her the dental insurance information and because she needed it. And we'd gotten into this conversation. And she says to me, she's like, you have a mind that kind of works like an underwriter. Have you ever thought about getting into the mortgage industry? And she'd been a remote contract processor for 10 years at that point. She'd owned her own business, worked from home, would go to different brokerages, pick up the stacks of files. This is back in the day with the 3-hole punch files, the big, huge manila ones you used to get. And she would process at home. So she talked to me about it. This was the very beginning of the internet now, guys. This is 2003. Went online and found a course called the Mortgage Training Institute. Had my credits from BYU transferred, and I took the Institute classes and got my certification, processing level 1 and 2. And I started remote processing just like her and built my business brokerage by brokerage by brokerage. And I noticed a lot of the files I was processing were not for people of color, but I just kind of assumed it was because I lived in Utah, which at that time had even less people of color living here. And didn't really think much of it because, again, I'm from a home that has historically been homeowners, my family line. And I went to a school where most of the kids' parents were homeowners as well. This wasn't really a situation that I thought was, uncanny, right? To me, it was normal. It wasn't an abnormality. And so when I started getting even deeper into the industry, I realized that this is probably a problem, not even just in Utah, but broad spectrum across the country. That's when I started reading HUD papers and really diving deep into the data of homeownership numbers based on the demographic. And then when the Great Recession hit in 2007, I transferred into loss mitigation. So I was in loss mitigation for 10 years, working with banks, using the HARP and the HAMP programs. I don't even know if you guys remember those from way back
Of
then.
course.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Working with 2 different attorneys' offices, helping them work directly with the lenders to assist people that had trustee auction dates to try to get their terms rewritten so they would not lose their home to foreclosure. And what I noticed historically from the thousands of families I worked with was a lack of foundational education about what being a homeowner meant, what an interest rate really was, what an adjustable rate was. I was shocked to know how many people did not even understand the balloon terms that they had signed. And they got themselves into these really difficult financial situations just based on a clear lack of knowledge. So I left loss mitigation after 10 years and then segued into affordable housing. So I've been in affordable housing since 2018. I worked for another down payment assistance company for 4 years. And then some of my team members and I decided, you know what, we can do it better. So we co-founded 𝗟𝗏 in 2022, and here we are.
Wow.
Wow.
Your roots run deep.
Yeah.
I heard that 5th generation homeowner story, and I love that you shared it. And I'm just fascinated by how deeply that has been ingrained in your family over that much time, and how powerful a story it is of your great grandfather.
Was it Henderson 𝗟𝗏𝘀?
Henderson Fairpult. Interestingly enough, the only reason my entire family knows this story by heart, other than obviously family story, is when he died, the local newspaper published their very first front page op-ed about a Negro. And that's how we all know the story so well. So we get a framed copy of the entire front page op-ed when we buy our first house, and we hang it on our wall.
How incredible.
No way.
That is just absolutely incredible.
Yeah. I mean, he changed the game. Like, as soon as they said he could own stuff, he's like, I'm going to own everything. Like, I'm going to start with land and just grow the business, or the family business ends up being. But you just knew home ownership was in your future.
I mean, I knew it because that was installed in us from the very beginning, right? But what it also taught me was one person can change the trajectory for lineage to come, right? So if he hadn't been kind of like this crazy old man obsessed with buying property, I may not be where I am today. So my message a lot of times when I go around speaking, I do a lot of public speaking. I do a lot of community speaking. I speak to churches. I speak in local town halls, trying to really empower people to purchase homes and use affordable housing programs, use down payment assistance or closing assistance. And my message to them always is, you don't know who down the line is going to benefit from this one decision. So maybe it's a townhome, maybe it's a twin home, maybe it's a fixer-upper, right? You can't buy the dream home unless you're really fortunate the first step out the door. The point is to get your foot on the property ladder and to begin acquiring that equity. And whether you choose to use the equity to purchase a new home, a move-up home, improve your home, take the money out to send your kids to college. You know, me and my sisters have no college debt. I don't know many people that went through school and don't have any debt, right? Why is that? It's not because we're independently wealthy. It's because my family's been very, very intentional with the transition of equity. And so whether that equity is $10,000 or $200,000, right? Have a plan for that, feel empowered about that, and then use that to benefit the lives of your children, grandchildren, and further on down the line.
What's fascinating about your story, to me, as a guy who's been in the mortgage industry for more than 20 years, there's a lot of motivations that people choose to tie into for their mortgage career. It might be to become a processor, then to become a processing manager, then become an underwriter, become an underwriting manager, become a chief operations officer, or chief compliance officer, or just take that typical career path up the ladder, or become a loan officer so you could make fairly substantial income as a loan originator if you're really successful. And the why is usually a career trajectory, resume building, and income generation, which there's nothing wrong with any of those motivations, but your why is really different. And I would love to dive into a little bit more about that if we could.
Yeah.
If you could define it, that would be a great place to start, perhaps.
So for me, obviously, I'm a Black American, right? And the Black American demographic has the lowest homeownership numbers of any other racial demographic. To put it in comparison for some of your listeners that may not be aware, so 44% of the Black community owns their own home. That doesn't sound so bad, right? Hey, 1 out of every 2 Blacks almost owns a home. That's great. But when you compare it to the white American homeownership demographic, that's 74%, almost 75 now. So you're talking about a large gap of wealth that's missing from our communities of color that our white American brothers and sisters have been able to enjoy due to things like the GA program, you know, those grant programs that came out after the war, and they were able to have FHA loans and build the suburbs. As you know, Black Americans and most minorities were excluded from those programs, either directly or through redlining. And we as a community have a lot of wealth to make up to get us to the same playing field as our white brothers and sisters. And so every person of color in the mortgage industry, it's incumbent upon us to A, spread the message, and B, create programs and opportunities that are innovative, that reach these communities to help them get into home ownership. And that's really the drive for me, right? I don't want my story to be an anomaly. And once I was really clear that not only was it an anomaly, but that most people had never even heard of a Black man owning 50 acres of land in the early 1900s, I really felt pressed to share my message as much as I could and empower people to take that first step. And hey, even if your first step is just, I'm going to look into it, I'm going to talk to a loan officer, I'm going to go to HUD and read some of their home ownership educational material, I'm going to go to Freddie Mac and read some of their homeownership steps. They have this great program that kind of outlines, step by step how you can save money, save for your down payment, program options that are available for assistance. A lot of resources out there, 100% for free. HUD counselors, 100% for free. It's a lack of knowledge that's keeping most people off of the property ladder. Yes, they know they should buy a home, but what does that look like? How do you get there? How do I facilitate saving for this down payment? Where do I want to live? Am I comfortable leaving my community and neighborhood for something that could potentially be better for my generations down the line? Just kind of broadening the message, getting people to at least start thinking about that home ownership could potentially be for them. And maybe, just maybe, I'm going to hold off on buying that Mercedes that I can't live in and save a little bit more for a down payment, get a condo, get a townhome, get my family in something tangible that's ours, that I can actually transition that money and make my children's future better. Because let's be honest, a car at the end of the day is not really going to help you much. And historically, Black Americans spend more money on their car than they do their rent payment.
Okay, one of my favorite poets ever, 𝗍𝗿𝗄𝗎, Earl
Oh,
Stevens.
love him.
𝗍𝗿𝗄𝗎 has a line in one of his songs that says, "Don't buy an $80,000 car before you buy a house." And I was
Yes.
like, coaching. He's coaching people right now.
Yeah, and Jay-Z talks about that a lot in his lyrics.
Yeah.
Just buy a home, buy artwork, buy something tangible that you're going to leave a legacy with. Stop spending your money on Louis Vuitton and Jordans. Like, look, I got Louis Vuitton and Jordans, but I also own a home. So I'm just saying, like, prioritize your assets accordingly.
Put it in proper order.
It's so crazy. We're in, like, literally today, the buyers of my house are getting the appraisal done. So I sold my house after 13 years. My wife and I are building. And so we need this 8 months in between selling our house and building a house. And so we just have to go rent a place.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I've been shopping for rentals, and I went into one. You can't fit our bed in the bedroom. And the lady's like, "No, you can. You just can't fit a dresser or anything else." And I'm like, but it was expensive. And of course, we have some renters here at the company, and I talk to them. I'm like, "Do you guys have any idea how expensive renting is?" What a jerk. And they're like, "Yeah, that's my life." And I'm like, it can feel overwhelming. And if you're just trapped in this constant, rental situation, it's always going to be that way because rent goes up. And once you get a mortgage, if it's fixed, it doesn't. But how do you get them to think outside of that?
To add to that a little bit here, we talk about this quite a bit in the affordable housing sector. People have this idea that, okay, if I can just rent for 2 years and then I can save X amount of dollars a month, then let's just pretend you never touch this money, right? You're putting 10% of your paycheck away every single month. With the way inflation and housing values work, more than likely, by the time you reach your target goal, whatever that is, 2 years later, 3 years later, you've saved your $20,000, $30,000. The math says it's still going to be insufficient if you wait that duration because home prices have increased, interest rate prices have increased, right? So either you settle for something that's far less than what originally you had your heart set on, or you keep saving, which keeps you in this cycle, which is why down payment assistance programs are so powerful. Whether it's a down payment assistance program like 𝗟𝗏𝗀, that's a national down payment assistance program, you can use it in any of your 50 states, or the thousands of down payment assistance programs that are available in your personal state, county, some cities, some jobs, firemen, police officer, nurses, etc. They have access to all kinds of incredible down payment assistance grant programs, right? You're far better off doing what you need to do today to get your foot on the property ladder instead of continuing to push the goalpost by this ever elusive amount you're going to need for closing costs and down payment.
Yeah, man, it's so awesome that you're doing this work. How do you get, what's the biggest difficulty in getting somebody over that? Like getting somebody to understand that even if it's a stretch, homeownership is, I love you call it the property ladder because it's so true. Like get on the first rung. Like what's the biggest thing you have to overcome in getting that mindset?
To be honest with you, it's social media. So if you get on social media and you look at the content creators, right, that are like, they call themselves lifestyle creators. So they put their house on there a lot. They're showing you how to decorate, things to buy. Everything looks so incredible. And oftentimes your mind immediately tells you, there is no way I can afford that. So I'm not even going to try.
Wow.
What those people are not telling you is they're getting paid to look like their home looks like this. Their entire kitchen has been sponsored by Wolf.
Or Sub-Zero. Yeah.
Right? Exactly. So you got to get off social media and stop comparing yourself to Pinterest boards and Instagrams and TikToks that are not reality. Yes, are there people out there who are 28 and living in a 5,000 square foot home that's completely brand new and customized to a T? You betcha. What's the percentage of those people? Pretty minimal, right? Most of us had to start with the 3.2 Rambler fixer-upper that was 30 to 40 years old, and you put your time in and you make improvements and you do what you can, and then you keep moving on. But it is the perception of that reality that keeps a lot of people from even wanting to try, because they look at their paychecks and then they look at what they see on social media and they're like, well, these two don't match, so I guess I'm out.
If you are watching this podcast and you're in the mortgage industry and you haven't checked out the Knowledge Coop, you definitely need to dive into the Knowledge Coop. In there, you will find content and community that will help you grow as an individual by learning everything there is to know about the mortgage industry. If you think you know everything, just dive in and take some classes, because there's always something more you can learn. To be successful in this business, you've got to continually learn. In addition, if you're a company and you want to teach your people in your own environment, we've got that in the Knowledge Coop Enterprise Services. So reach out to us, check out knowledgecoop.com. Definitely join Coop Plus. Let's get back to the podcast.
So that perception is so real, but there's also two other factors that affect it. One is we as a country do a horrible job of educating our children about financial literacy at all. Now, there's a ton of people who are really trying to make that their effort. Dave Savage is working with a group of people right now. There's a bunch of people, Daniel Harkavy from Building Champions. These are all people who have taken on this idea of trying to create opportunities to educate at the youngest ages in our schools of financial literacy. The other side of that are the regulations that we create as an industry that might be well-intentioned, but often don't bring about the result that they are purported to try to accomplish. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So let's go back a little bit here. So the credit system was established, and I'm usually really great with dates, but this one's escaping me. Sometime in the mid 80s was when FICO and the current credit system, how we know it, how it looks like today, was established. Now, if you do any research about the creation of FICO and the credit rating system, you will immediately realize that the credit rating system was made for one predominant group of American citizens, and that would be the male white W-2 wage earner. And, you know, in the 80s and 90s, great. You had nothing but business. That's wonderful, right? You weren't trying to expand that program because you were trying to keep your boundaries pretty tight. What does that mean? That means that you've excluded other demographics that use credit in very different ways. So research tells us, and data points from HUD and the Census Bureau tell us, that Blacks and Latinos specifically use credit and money very different than white American communities. Latinos specifically do not like using credit. They like using cash for everything. There's a large portion of the Black community as well that has absolutely no faith in banking. Back to my grandpa with the bricks of tinfoil underneath his mattress, right? This is not an anomaly. I can't tell you how many people I personally know today that don't have a bank account because they don't trust banks. And to be honest with you, if you go back and you do your research, you can see the generational trauma that our financial systems have put on communities of color. So I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form, they are not inclined to feel this way about the banking system. As an industry, the financial system has a lot of work to do to make up for that generational trauma that they've caused, whether you're talking about the Great Recession, whether you're talking about the Civil Rights Movement, whether you're talking about redlining, whether you're talking about the hordes of cases we saw from 2008 to 2010, where people of color were suing their servicer for not explaining the programs they were in and losing their home, right? So there's a large sector of our communities of color that don't fit into the FICO model, A, because it wasn't designed for them to fit into, and B, just due to generational triggering trauma, right? It feels uncomfortable for them. And then you have people that are coming into these communities and they are very well-intentioned. They want to help. They want to talk about credit counseling. They want to talk about how to utilize credit properly. They want to talk about how to save efficiently. But unfortunately, those people, no offense, boys, look like you. And if you're coming in a community that looks like me, you might not be well received, right? And so it's incumbent upon us to get more people in the community that are educated, that can bring that message to the community in a grassroots way where it's trusted and there's some loyalty there. Additionally, expanding the underwriting requirements, I think, is going to be a real thing in the next few years. So at Arrive, what we've done for one of our programs is we're implementing a program called 𝗟𝗀𝘀. And 𝗟𝗀𝘀 is created by Form Free. I'll save you of this, the granular detail about what it is, but broad spectrum, high level overview. It is an AI tool that takes bank statements to calculate a score and give you a risk indicator based on that person's spending habits and saving habits, and not based on their FICO score. Because just because you have a 720 FICO doesn't mean you know how to save $6. That just means you know how to pay your bills on time and you know how to pay your debt on time. But your debt to income ratio can be trash. Conversely, you can have someone with almost no credit score because they've never used credit before, and they could have tons and tons of money in the bank and be a great saver. That person that has tons and tons of money in the bank that's a no score, or has maybe a 605 or 610 because they really haven't used credit very much, they're not going to get the best home loan, if they even can get a home loan in a conventional or FHA transaction, right? So 𝗟𝗀𝘀 allows you to look at a person's actual spending and saving habits, get a risk indicator based on that. Yeah, we can still run them through AUS, but we rely on the risk indicator that we get from 𝗟𝗀𝘀 based on their spending habits more so than we rely on the AUS program for one of our programs.
Fascinating. So how does that scale to the broader market? How do we make that become more of an industry-wide mindset of looking for ways? I had a chat with Tony Thompson, who says great things about you. We're going to have him on the show here, hopefully in a few weeks. But Tony, of course, NAMBA, the National Association. No, I'm gonna butcher the name.
National Association of Minority Mortgage Bankers of America.
Yeah, so he's not affiliated directly with the MBA, but he brings that connection and is trying to create influence with the MBA. So what can we do on a more global spectrum to have a greater impact on regulatory reform that opens up home ownership opportunities for marginalized communities?
So this 𝗟𝗀𝘀 program I was just telling you about right now, there are actually people that are currently lobbying HUD to get that included into the conventional AUS model. With FHA as well. There's another program out there that's not exactly like 𝗟𝗀𝘀, but it's similar, where it also does AUS modeling based on bank statement programs. And there's several lenders that are using that program internally and comparing that data versus the AUS they get. And so I really think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a huge shift and more using people's spending habits, bank statement analyzation. Alternative trade lines are also a new thing that are really big. People are starting to look more at trade lines in alternative ways. And for your viewers that may or may not listen, that means taking things that you're paying every month and you're paying on time and using those as in lieu of traditional trade lines like credit cards and home loan and auto loans, right? So we're
cell phone bills, internet bills,
medical bills, cell phone bills, any kind of payment that you make every single month. If you can show that as a way that you are a good candidate and that your credit risk is low and that you prioritize your bills using those alternative trade lines in lieu of saying you have a MasterCard or an Amex, okay, great. But are you basically maxing those out every month and then just paying them down slowly? So it just depends on how your spending habits are, but more importantly is, can you save, can you spend, what do you have left in reserves every month, and what are your running reserves that you keep there? Using those models are being implemented, like I said, right now in a lot of bigger mortgage companies. Guild does a lot of work in this as well. And David Batney is a huge proponent for these types of programs. So again, I think in the next few years, we're going to see some inclusivity here, but this is a really exciting thing for me, for the mortgage industry, because I think it opens the door to people that have been historically held out just due to FICO issues.
I want to go back to something you said earlier and talk about the way your brain works. So you got into underwriting and you made this statement. You're like, then I underwrote for all these years. And then I started researching on HUD's website and started digging into a lot of these types of like fair lending issues and the types of credit availability. Nobody does that. Like that's what I do. And I thought I was the only one. And
He lovingly calls it nerding out.
I nerd out on this stuff, but like, what is it like? What is it in you that you were just like, we should figure this out? And I bet there's data.
I think again, it goes back to my upbringing. You know, if you think about just the Black community at large, right? I don't think you think about the Cosbys. Well, look, Bill's Cosby
Nobody does anymore.
did enough to ruin his own image, but you know what I'm trying to say.
But Rudy was adorable.
Yeah. Right? That's like the anomaly Black family is like the Huxtables, right? Or the people you saw in the different world when they were going to college.
Right.
But that was my reality. And as soon as I realized that I was one of the lucky few that was my reality, I thought, well, this is completely unacceptable. Like we are not in the 1800s anymore. There's no reason that there's an entire demographic of Americans that feel like they are still being locked out of the American dream. And for me, that was very upsetting, which is when I started nerding out on the data. And then, you know, I started really incorporating that into my underwriting. I would look, even in my processing days, I would fight with my underwriters and say, hey, I reviewed this myself. I know the FICO is low, but look at the trade lines. They don't have any. Most of them are stagnant, but look at these reserves. Look at their spending patterns. I've been doing this for years, even before Ricky was a thing. So when I heard about the Ricky program, I was like, oh, well, this makes perfect sense to me because I've already been reviewing this data and making this case for all these people that have strong ability to repay. They're just not getting a chance. And I just want to do what I personally can do in this life to spread awareness and spread the message. And if I can even help, you know, a couple hundred more homeowners get into homes every year that typically wouldn't, I'm happy.
So it's a justice thread that runs through you of like, if something's not right and there's an availability of something that not everybody gets to play at, I'm going to go and make a difference and make a change there.
I am born of a 35-year Atlantic City police officer. My mother has been on multiple committees for justice rights, and the town we used to live in, she was on the women's committee fighting for fair rights. My parents both marched in the civil rights movement. So
Wow.
So this is just how you were brought up. And it's how your brain's wired, but it's interesting that you're just like, well, then I'm going to make a difference. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have two sisters.
What are they doing?
My one sister's a teacher, so she teaches
making a difference.
Yeah. Teaches at an inner city school to disadvantaged kids. She's been doing it for 20 years. And my other sister's in tech.
Oh my gosh. Your parents have to be so like, all right, we did something right.
Yeah, they still expect more.
Of course. Well, it's great to hear how and why you came to be who you are. So maybe an interesting question would be, you referenced two guys that look like us. Let's talk about the very pale elephant in the room. What can two guys that look like us do, or people in our audience do, to continue to affect change without seeming like a paternalistic approach to influencing?
Did you just call me a pale elephant?
Well,
you said, let's talk about the pale elephant in the room.
In a really nice way.
That was all right.
Hey, I'm married to a pale elephant. He's a pretty good guy, so I'll keep him around.
Okay, outside of marrying somebody, what else can we do?
I definitely think, number one, use your voice. Specifically, you can, because you are out at a lot of conferences. You talk to a lot of influential people. You will start to notice the opportunities where you can provide a voice that is more trusted than maybe someone else in the room, right? Or if you see someone else in the room that has a great idea, whether that's a woman or a person of color, and you agree with the idea, don't just nod, emphatically agree, right? So I always say, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. So be the hell yes when it feels like, yeah, that's a great idea. I'm going to support that person. I'm going to offer to partner with that person. I'm going to use my voice to highlight this issue, whatever that may be. And more people that are influential and already trusted and have a name for themselves, the more these people start to speak about these issues, the faster it catches fire. It's great that the minority community is saying, hey guys, nobody's listening to us. We still need some help over here. But it makes a larger difference when influential people can get that message up to the top tier of HUD, top tier of Fannie, top tier of Freddie. And those are the people that can actually affect change. But in order to get to those people, you got to have enough people like you guys that have influence that deliver the message.
Okay, so I actually went to Justin. I always tell Justin Wiseman at the MBA, I'm like, stop me when I'm annoying you too much, because I always bring like logical arguments to him. Like, why are we doing this? Why aren't we doing this at Mortgage Bankers Association? I went to him because there was an article in the paper. This was 2 years ago in the paper. Listen to me, I'm an old man. There was a news thing that hit the TikTok, and
well, that sounds younger. Good job.
I saw this stupid headline, and it said, I think it was Chase, and it said Chase is providing a new program to assist, it was a down payment assistance program for Black and minority, Black and Hispanic homeowners. And the way people took that is that, like, I saw so many stupid things about, oh, this is reverse redlining. You're only letting people of that race get in, right? Which, to my argument, is if white people like got more enraged about reverse redline or about real redlining as they did about reverse redlining, we could actually make a difference. But as soon as it feels like reverse, it's like, oh my gosh, people get mad. So I went to Justin and I said, and by the way, that program was for people moving into that neighborhood. That program wasn't specifically based on race. But I went to Justin.
I think there were 10 MSAs that they offered that in.
Yeah, yeah. And so I said, Justin, you talk to all these banks. Like, please talk to the banks and tell them they need to change the way that they're doing it. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, you're going to make a program so good in a minority community that you want to build up that my kids are going to go by there because they're looking for affordable housing too. And then a bunch of white people are moving in, and now there's a Trader Joe's and a Whole Foods, and now the people who live there have to move out because they can't afford their rent.
Oh, good old gentrification.
Yeah, I said, if you make that program where you have to currently reside in that community to qualify, then all of a sudden you're actually helping the community instead of getting rid of people from that community. And he's like, oh. I'm like, can you please tell all your bank friends that? Like, we have to think, because I feel like it's a headline. And I feel like people want a headline. Look at us. We're being, sensitive. We're being diverse. But you're not. Like, what you're doing is creating something that makes you feel better, but it's really a symbolic action and it's not a real change. And so I'm a big fan of the things you're doing because more of us have to say this stuff.
I will also just interject here. It's probably a good idea, at least we've done that at my last 2 teams, where you have to hire a diverse marketing team. Critical mistake that a lot of well-meaning companies have. They've crafted these programs. They've really put a lot of heart and soul into them. And then the language they use or the imagery they use to describe the program is highly offensive. Mm-hmm. And they just do not know it. I'll give you an example that actually happened in a room I was in. So my last company I worked for, we had just decided to lower the FICO band for one of our programs. And we were lowering the FICO band because we had done a bunch of data trending and we realized that we were not experiencing any risk in this specific lower FICO bucket. I believe it was 6 to 620 at the time. It might've been 580 to 600. This was 5 years ago. So I'm going off memory here. But when I got the marketing material, that was an announcement to say, hey, we've lowered our FICO scores. It had a picture of a Black family sitting outside of a house, and it said FICO scores as low as 600 now available. Now, that may seem benign enough if you are not a person of color. But if you are a person of color, when I see as low as 600, and then I see a Black family sitting there in front of a house, to me, that means, oh, Black people with poor credit, come on, we can help you too, right? There's a way that you can socially, racially be gentle, inclusive, and keep nuance in your messaging. And it doesn't have to just be a brown face. So I would just encourage people to, if your marketing team looks a lot like you, expand, right? So if you're an all minority company, get some different people in there to look at your stuff and say, oh, I know it's Hispanic Heritage Month, but that is a very broad community. So we cannot just say we can't have this messaging because it only applies to the Puerto Rican community, or this is a strong messaging for the Mexican community, but this could potentially piss off the Cubans, right? Same thing in the Black community, same thing in the Asian community. There's a lot of racial nuance here in each demographic. And I feel like a lot of times that sensitivity is not taken care of. And so I would say, do what you can as far as marketing, but make sure it's racially inclusive and it's nuanced and sensitive. And then you won't have those issues that I had with my marketer 4 years ago, because we kind of got into it a little bit.
Well, what you said just now is interesting, because you said, I think your word was should have to. And in my opinion, if you want to grow your business, you need to. Like, this isn't about, and I just gave the speech at the California compliance conference that I'm going to next week. Last year, we were talking about fair lending, and all the compliance officers were like, well, I don't even understand what we have to do. So what are the things we can't do? And and it was just like this burden of fair lending. And I said, you need to flip that burden on its head. It's not a burden. It's, if you want to grow your business, you need to reach more people. And the way you reach more people is finding people that aren't currently homeowners. And there's a bunch of people that aren't currently homeowners you could be going and finding if you have the right marketing team to go out there and do those things. So it's not, it can't be viewed as oh gosh, the government's doing this. It's got to be viewed as we're doing this because this is what's getting us more business. Like, it's selfish and greedy to do the right thing, if that makes sense. Like,
100%.
Why not be greedy and go after more market share of more communities?
To your point, so right now, 85% of Americans that are homeowners have an interest rate below 5.
Right.
Good luck getting to the people with sub interest rates below 3. I'm never getting rid of this house. It's 275, baby, fixed rate, 30 years. I'm good. Like, so you got to find a new demographic of consumers. You can't go back to the old well to refi people because they have a rate that's lower than anything you can offer right now. So creativity and inclusivity is going to be your best friends, because you've got to market yourself to an entire demographic of people that don't like you and don't trust you. So providing clear, concise language, showing that you are a trusted either company, resource, or person, and then being inclusive in your messaging is going to bring more consumers in the door, instead of just relying on that old book of business that you think that you can continue to keep refiing. Those people aren't going anywhere because their rate is just too low. So as we move into this new exciting time in 2025, where we're going to try to get more business and bring more people into home ownership, this is a way for mortgage companies at large to do this. And you don't have to do anything except be, socially creative, be sensitive to racial, and maybe have a couple of programs, to your point, Ken, that can actually benefit people specifically already living in those communities. Everybody has some feelings around gentrification, and my grandma's old neighborhood got gentrified too, and that was really, really off-putting when I went there and I saw they had a Whole Foods now. It was really strange. But there is some beauty in gentrification because it does bring healthier options as far as food choices. It does bring more doctor's offices. It brings more services, right? It also brings improvements to the community at large. So there's wonderful parts about the gentrification process. The not so great part is the community members that have built years and generations of loving memories in those neighborhoods being forced out, either due to increased property taxes, eviction, whole communities being torn down of apartments to put up big, huge houses. That's where I feel like we need to have a little bit more sensitivity. And if you can offer programs to stalwarts of the community that have been there for generations and are beloved, you're going to get a lot further with that specific community rather than making grandma have to leave.
I really love the way you frame this, because there is this moral imperative that you would like to think large companies, large lending institutions would hold on to, because you'd like them to be driven by a why that's important and big and meaningful. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's just marketing. They want to appear as if they care, whether they do or not. But when you can appeal to the moral imperative and the selfish, greedy motivation of grow your business,
Right.
Target a larger audience and be effective at targeting it, speaks to get people in your marketing department that actually understand how to expand into that market more effectively than you might, Kirk, or you might, Ken, and appeal to their greed. I love the two can work in harmony, the moral imperative and the desire to expand and to grow your business opportunities.
Absolutely. You can be selfishly anthropologist. Yeah, we want to make more money for myself. I'll be a selfish entrepreneur. Just I want our company to make a ton of money, but I want to do it with some heart and I want to do it with some compassion.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, I want to feel good about the decisions that we made as a company, as a community in lending, knowing that we're doing everything we can to equal the playing field and give people opportunities to get their foot on the property ladder and start climbing.
I want you to address this because this is the thing that you said in Napa when you got soapboxed a little bit, which I love, and soapbox is a good thing. Sometimes you got to get on a soapbox. You jumped up and said, you talked about the HMDA boxes at the end of the 1003, and I do not wish to furnish versus being able to claiming your race and being counted in the numbers. Can you talk about people don't want their race on the 1003?
So this goes even further than the 1003. 1003, I can make that summary really quickly. A lot of minorities do not feel comfortable putting their racial demographic on the 1003 because they feel like they are going to be stereotyped and eventually rejected because they are a member of a certain racial demographic. That's the long and short of it. People don't want you to base them on their race, right? That's why you have a large sector of the Black community that names their children racially ambiguous names. So if your name is Stephen Smith and your FICO score is 680 and your income is $100,000 a year and you pick, I do not wish to furnish my racial information, that feels like a safer choice because you don't feel like you're going to be judged based on whatever internal bias someone may have, then you don't know who the someone is. So then you're not going to want to disclose that you're Black because you don't want to be rejected. And if you know anything about HMDA data, you know that Blacks and Latinos, Mexicans and Asians, well, the Latino community as a whole, but out here specifically, it's for the Mexican community. The Latino community, Blacks and Asians get rejected at a disproportionate rate, even when their FICOs, income, and reserves are the same as the white community. So that's why a lot of people check do not wish to provide. Additionally, we have the same issue with the census data. So any piece of census data you get that has a minority community attached to it, you're going to want to take that with a grain of salt because most people in marginalized communities do not fill out the census form. And this causes issues because this also causes a lack of resources. Because if we don't have an actual accurate number of the people who live in this community, the racial demographic information doesn't just tell you how many people of a specific race are living in a community. It also lets you know that by data, this is how many of your community members are going to suffer a stroke based on their racial demographic. This is how many members of your community are going to be at risk of diabetes. So we need to have XYZ amount of hospitals within certain proximities because we know certain communities live in this area. So when you don't fill out the census form, you don't get a lot of the services that you need to grow your community simply because you don't trust the government, so you don't want to fill out the form. To speak nothing of people who have family living with them that, maybe I-10 individuals or maybe here waiting for a green card status, you're never going to get any information from them because we've made it, I'm not trying to get political here, but it's unsafe, right, for them to disclose that information. And so it's the same thing with the HMDA form. It feels scary for a lot of minority communities to disclose that information. And until we've made some inroads, like I said, with curing that generational trauma associated with the financial industries, this is going to be a continued issue.
It's so interesting you pointed out the same credit, same income, same asset. The denial rate is ridiculous. And I always talk about in seminars the case against a company, we'll call them Bancorp South. It's a settlement against a bank for redlining. And when I read that case, they had actual transcripts from a CFPB undercover operative that was in there. And what they would do is send a Black and a white applicant in. And the white applicant was told, even with worse credit score, worse income, worse assets, the white applicant was told, you can basically have anything you want. We have all these programs. And the Black applicant was given FHA and told that they barely qualify. And so you can read these conversations. And I always think it's interesting when people live in a world where they think that's not existent. And that's a great world, cute. But like when you start reading what's really happening and you go, oh my, this is real. Like this is really happening. Because and I shouldn't say cute, like in an area where you have people not experiencing a lot of that type of behavior, to read that is shocking, to know that this really exists, but it's also an awareness piece that everybody should know, that this is what people deal with when trying to get a loan. And so, of course, they're not saying it because they've been treated differently, or their brother was treated differently, or their parents were treated differently.
Or you have a Black friend that he's a homeowner. So that story you must have read must have just been anecdotal, right?
Right.
Your Black friend being the anecdotal one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it just takes a different way of looking at it as a whole. And again, to my earlier point, just some sensitivity and some compassion. Like we can admit that there is racial bias. We all have bias that we didn't choose to have it, just based on our upbringing, where we live, the racial demographic that we're from, things we learned from our parents, things we learned from just our immediate surroundings. You're gonna have some bias. We went through this about 2 years ago. I did a whole series of pieces on appraisal bias, because it was a huge issue back then. So much so that people who were from communities of color were taking down artwork. They were taking down family photos. I'm sure everybody read that op-ed in the New York Times where there was that appraisal disparity, where it was a Black home and it was in San Francisco. They had it undervalued by like $300,000. The guy had his best friend move in, had a different appraiser come in and took down all the family photos, and it was his best friend that answered the door and entered him into the home to do the appraisal. Market value. So we don't need to act like this is not happening. We all know, or we should know at this point, just based on data, lawsuits, HMDA data, census data, that this is happening. We can kind of move past that point now, right? And start looking for innovative ideas of how to course correct as a country.
We'll send you a video we did on that, by the way. We did a spoof video on that where the guy doesn't get his house appraised, so he puts a Cranberries record on and gets a bunch of really funny white people stuff. We'll send it to you. It was really good.
I want to see this.
Yeah, it's important to note that it won't do any good to try to influence marginalized communities to be more willing to participate in this information so that their communities can benefit from all the great resources that could be made available, unless and until we mostly eradicate the biases that still exist, even though they shouldn't, but still exist today.
100%. And I think each individual person who's watching this podcast, start with yourself. What did Michael Jackson say? Start with the man in the mirror. I have to do it myself all the time too. You see someone and you're automatically judging them for whatever the case may be. Even if it's a mom in the store and the toddler is acting like a crazy freaking person, you think, oh, my mind is like, oh, how's that parenting going? Really? Maybe that 3-year-old is just hungry and they have limited language and their snack is in the car and they just want to get out of the store, right? Maybe the guy freaking out at the airport isn't a crazy person who's going to bomb the plane. Maybe he's on his way to his mom's funeral and he's just flooded right now. So I think if we can each give every person that we meet a little bit of grace, just give them the benefit of the doubt, just a little bit, we will be amazed at what we can do as a society to bring people together and create more opportunities for the least of us.
Well, this is a whole nother conversation for a whole nother show, but I am convinced that empathy is a superpower. And I think if we could learn not only how to teach financial literacy, but help people understand how unique and powerful empathy really is, then we can radically change the world.
Oh, you guys, I just did a piece on this exact topic for Housing Wire. It just got released last week. I did an op-ed. It was called, what was it? Empathy in the Face of Foreclosure, the homeowner behind the spreadsheet.
Wow, that's 10 years of your loss mitigation coming into play.
That was pretty much my love letter to loss mit. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, listen, if people wanted to get a hold of you, whether it was the work you're doing at Arrive Home or to have you speak or whatever, if somebody in our audience just wanted to know more about you and the work you're doing, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
Obviously, Arrive Home. Whoops, sorry, wrong way. Arrive Home. www.arrivehome.org is our website. People can click the info button and get in touch with me there. My email is ty.christensen@arrivehome.org, and I am everywhere on LinkedIn.
Well, we will post graphics on that. We always like to end with a question that we don't tee up at the beginning because we don't want you to know what the question is, but Ken will hit you with that.
Here's a question. You get the chance to go back in time and you get to walk up on little 10-year-old Ty playing on the playground. And you get to give that little kid one piece of advice based on everything you've been through, everything you've learned. What would be that one piece of advice you give to that little girl?
First of all, you guys, this is perfect. I have a picture of 10-year-old Ty that my sister just found.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no way.
I'm trying to find it right now. Oh, I must not have it in here. Anyway, I'll send it to you so you can drop it in. It's
Okay.
a Christmas ornament with my look. All I
Oh
can
my
say is thank God for
gosh.
braces and hair straighteners. Y'all are gonna die when you get this photo. But what I would say to 10-year-old Ty is trust your gut implicitly. Because the times I have gone the most off course is when I did not listen to myself. That still small voice is your soul that knows you better than your cognitive mind knows yourself. Always trust it.
Love
And
it.
That's
if
great
the
stuff.
Eagles are in the Super Bowl for the second time, don't have the second glass of wine and start crying.
All right. All right. That first piece of it, that's great. The second piece, wow, there's a story there.
Oh, there's a story there. Yeah, we were hosting a Super Bowl party the second time the Eagles were in the Super Bowl 2 years ago and they lost, and I literally cried like a baby. Embarrassed.
Well, at least
Well,
you
now
went. We don't get to celebrate Super Bowls as Seahawk fans very often.
Oh,
Yeah, you got a pretty good running back now, so
Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
That would
Well,
be my
listen,
advice.
we want to thank you, Ty. This has
Yeah.
been fabulous. We just really appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast today.
For having me, guys. It was wonderful to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll see you around.